On the bitterly cold afternoon of February 6, 1958, a young man from Ordsall, Salford, sat aboard a British European Airways aircraft at Munich Airport. His name was Edward "Eddie" Coleman, known to Manchester United supporters as Snake Hips, because of the way he could glide past opponents with a twist of his body. He was only 21 years old, yet he was already a two-time league champion and one of the brightest members of Matt Busby's famous Busby Babes. The team were returning home after a thrilling 3-3 draw against Red Star Belgrade, a result that had sent Manchester United into the semi-finals of the European Cup. Spirits were high. The young side seemed destined for greatness. They stopped in Munich to refuel before continuing to Manchester. Few could have imagined that within hours, football would suffer one of its darkest tragedies. Snow had fallen heavily across West Germany. 2 attempts to take off were abandoned when the aircraft's engines surged unexpectedly. Passengers grew uneasy. Some suggested staying overnight. Yet after checks were carried out, a 3rd attempt was made. As the aircraft thundered down the runway, it failed to gain enough speed. Slush covering the runway slowed the plane fatally. It skidded through a fence, struck a house, and exploded into flames. 23 people would eventually lose their lives. Among those killed were 8 Manchester United players: Roger Byrne, Jeff Bent, Mark Jones, David Pegg, Tommy Taylor, Liam Whelan, Eddie Coleman, and Duncan Edwards, who survived the crash but died from his injuries 15 days later. 15 others also lost their lives in the disaster. Yet for Salford people, one name has always carried a special weight. Eddie Coleman had grown up in Ordsall, playing football on local streets before joining Manchester United as a teenager. He was the youngest of those who died in the disaster. Friends remembered his humour, his confidence, and his remarkable balance on the ball. In the weeks before Munich, he had even scored in the European Cup tie against Red Star Belgrade. Back in Salford, the news spread quickly. Families gathered around radios. Newspapers appeared with black headlines. Streets fell silent. Thousands mourned not only a football team, but a generation of young men whose best years still lay ahead. The funerals drew huge crowds. Flowers lined pavements. Across Manchester and Salford, people felt they had lost sons, brothers, and friends. There were heroes amid the devastation. Goalkeeper Harry Gregg repeatedly entered the wreckage to pull survivors to safety, rescuing teammates and other passengers despite the danger of explosion. Manager Matt Busby was so badly injured that he was twice given the last rites, yet he survived and later rebuilt the club. 10 years later, Manchester United fulfilled the dream of those lost when they won the European Cup in 1968. Today, more than 6 decades later, the Munich Air Disaster remains one of football's most poignant stories. Memorials stand in Manchester, Munich, and Salford. Supporters still sing "The Flowers of Manchester" in memory of those who never came home. And among those remembered is a young lad from Ordsall, Eddie Coleman, Salford's Busby Babe. He was only 21 when fate intervened on that snowy runway, but his name has never been forgotten. In Salford, he remains not just a footballer, but a symbol of a generation whose promise was lost far too soon.